Hello, my name is Paul Doherty, and the presentation I'm going to give this evening deals with the Brandywine battlefield. The Battle of Brandywine, which occurred on September 11, 1777, was in fact the beginning of what is known as the Philadelphia Campaign, in which the British were actually able to capture Philadelphia, and from which George Washington moved into encampment at Valley Forge. The British Army under General Howe was in New York City earlier that summer. He put his troops on ships, moved them around the Delmarva Peninsula, up the Chesapeake, and then eventually up the Elk River, landing in Elkton, Maryland. From there, he moved on to a location called Kennett Square in Pennsylvania and remained there briefly before he moved out. Uh, George Washington, getting information that the British were moving, took his troops out of Philadelphia and lined them up along the Brandywine Creek, which is a fairly large creek running north to south, and provided an opportunity for Washington to set up his forces and hopefully hold the British back. The British moved out on the morning of the 11th. They're broken into two wings, one under a German officer by the name of Knyphausen, who took predominantly Hessian troops along the route of march to get to a location called Chadds Ford, where Washington had set up the majority of his defense, anticipating a British attack. Unbeknownst to Washington, General Cornwallis took the other wing of Howe's army and moved off to the northeast, moved beyond the main Brandywine Creek, and crossed both of the two forks that feed into the main creek. He now moved south. Now, Washington, anticipating that his flank might get turned, had positioned regiments all along the creek at the various fords. However, once he got to the fork, he didn't anticipate the British moving that far north, and of course they did. Turned south and then attacked Washington's flank, which usually is what the British did in their victories over the Americans. So that's a synopsis of the battle. The British force that flanked Washington quickly sent the Americans packing, and then the position along Chadds Ford couldn't hold, and they too retreated. It was sort of a chaotic retreat, but the American army remained intact and moved back toward a location called Turk's Head, which is modern day Westchester, Pennsylvania. Now, I wanted to talk about the site itself. The battlefield, predominantly, the center of gravity for this is a number of, let's say, 10 to 12 acre territory that has owned by the Brandywine Battlefield Association. There, they've erected a visitor center and a small museum and a parking lot. Right next to that location is the Benjamin Ring House, which was George Washington's headquarters during the battle. That can be toured. It's part of the historic scene at that location. During the anniversaries of the battle, in and around September 11th each year, there is a reenactment set up where soldiers from both sides are replicated. They have an encampment, and of course, it's an awesome opportunity for living history. Another location is approximately 100 yards from the fort itself. John Chadd, of which the fort is named, had his house there, and there's a number of other building structures that still exist. All this is controlled by the Chadds Ford Historical Society, which conducts tours and has their own type of living history. Uh, the main thoroughfares for the battlefield, which is quite extensive, it goes on easily beyond 10 miles until you get to the fork in the Brandywine itself, and then about a mile or so south at Chadds Ford. There is a road now called the Creek Road. Didn't exist during the battle, but it affords an excellent opportunity to modern day tourists to move all the way up and down the creek and see what it pretty much looked like back then. It's in Chester County at that location is still very rural, so it's relatively unchanged. There's probably more trees than there were back then, but for the most part, the battlefield's intact. The ford sites where Cornwallis crossed are actually bridges now. That main avenue of approach that he took still exists today, and that's Route 284. The major route that was the location of the route of march for the Hessians is modern day Route 1, and that was the retreat route for the American Army as well as the approaching route for the British soldiers. Another road of interest is the Birmingham Road, which is obviously a modern day road, but existed as a main thoroughfare during the battle. Located on Birmingham Hill is the Birmingham Quaker Meeting House, which is still in existence today and still operates as a meeting house. It was there during the battle, and the cemetery was established at that point. The walls of the cemetery actually provided a defensive position for the American troops, and that was their main location. So the battlefield itself at Brandywine offers an excellent historical opportunity to take a automotive route of the entire battlefield and do a tour in that fashion. Well, I appreciate you listening to my presentation. I look forward to listening to all of yours. Thank you very much.